Hi everyone, welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is June 19th, 2018. As a consequence of the former governor resigning due to a sex scandal in Niigata, they had a by-election that was held just last Sunday, and it's shaken up the Abe administration because it's dealing with the nuclear restart issue, and it's really carrying a lot of potential for fodder that we talk about here on Tokyo on Fire. Michael, you're watching this issue too. The nuclear reactor restart is a big issue on this election.
Well, it was basically the elephant in the room. And you have to say it that way because while one candidate was talking about nothing but the restart of the world's largest nuclear power station, the Kashizaki Kariwa plant.
That you can say that smoothly is pretty good.
It's a hard one because it's a really complicated name.
There are two municipalities bound together and a huge nuclear reactor.
Yeah, well, the 7 nuclear reactors at this site, which all have been offline from before the disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. They were offline due to a Niigata earthquake that happened a time before. And that they should be restarted in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster is what one of the candidates was talking about all the time. But the other one, the one who was supported by the LDP and by the Komeito and who eventually won the election, kept completely silent about what his plans are. Whereas the other candidate, who was supported by virtually all of the opposition parties together, including the communists, who did not run their own candidate, instead helped with a joint candidate, she just talked about it all the time. So it was a sort of a national or a sub-regional referendum on the nuclear power issue.
Right.
And now that we've come a long distance away in terms of time from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station disaster, what's the future of Japan's energy mix? And that was basically what was on the table. And the outcome was actually somewhat surprising in that the joint candidate in a section of the country which has previously supported DPJ candidates, and indeed the previous governor was an anti-nuclear governor, that the anti-nuclear side would fail to get their person over the line is something of a surprise outcome.
Right. Just to put it in context for some of our viewers, the Fukushima reactor is on the Pacific side, and the nuclear reactor in Niigata is on the Japan sea side.
Japan sea side, and they're both run by TEPCO.
Right.
The Tokyo Electric Power Company.
And before you go further, it was suffering from some suspicion that it might just collapse and fall into the ocean too.
Oh, but it's one of these. It's on the ocean. It was built on a site that it was a totally corrupt decision that got it there, basically in order to provide a tremendous amount of funding to the political organization of Tanaka Kakue, the great political manipulator from Niigata. As a part of his development of his home prefecture.
It worked.
It worked. I mean, he got a Shinkansen to go to Niigata, even though there was no real economic reason to go there, and to power the building of this nuclear power station, the largest one in the world. It's been offline, and since the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station disaster, Japan has not relied on nuclear power. It's basically something that was in mothballs already, and it was just sitting there waiting for a restart. TEPCO is a ward of the state. It's currently burning through cash in order to pay for all of the fuel oil and natural gas. Yeah.
Their shares fell like 4% just before the election. I mean,
and then soared immediately afterward because there's a very strong, well, much stronger outcome that possible of a restart of this nuclear power station, at least a few of the reactors, the most recently made ones, the number 6 and number 7 reactors, because they're the newest and they're the easiest to bring up to code. Throughout the nuclear power industry, the oldest reactors, the ones that have the number 1 or number 2 designation, there's pretty much a sense that for every nuclear power station that those are unsalvageable, that there's no way to really bring them back in unless the plant itself is really new. And so there is this sense that maybe we'll get some something back from the investment that was made, the massive investment that was made into the power station there. Now, interestingly, even though the anti-nuclear side lost in the Niigata prefectural election, we also had the recent talk of mothballing and decommissioning the Fukushima Daini, the one that's farther to the south, the one that was not damaged, the nuclear power station that was not damaged in the tsunami of 2011.
Right.
That station seems to be is going to be written off, and so there's sort of a quid pro quo. It's sort of a balancing act that's going on with TEPCO, which runs all three of those stations, saying, okay, the ones on the Pacific Ocean, we're gonna abandon those, and instead go and try to salvage what it can and as much as possible from the Kashiwazaki nuclear power station with its 7 reactors,
right.
because Fukushima Daiichi was 6 reactors gone, and then now they're talking about getting rid of the Daini station as well. It's things are in motion, and it's all basically because the Abe government wants to restart the nuclear power plants.
Well, without the nuclear mix, I mean, that's about 23% of the power that was supplied to Japan when it was fully ramped up, right? And then we had the earthquake. That shut down. So to fill in that hole, I mean, it's got to be fossil fuels.
That's what it has been. And indeed, if we had had this conversation 3 years ago,
Where goes Kyoto?
We're going to be talking about the trade-off between burning fossil fuels, bringing them here, and the carbon output. But now, of course, the problem is that for many of the prefectures that house these nuclear power stations, they are mostly rural, and they've gone big into solar farms.
Right.
And so there is this competing narrative that if Japan could only go more into renewables, even more than it has gone before, that these stations don't need to be restarted. And that's what the opposition was pounding on and hoping would be a pretty good electoral message in the Niigata governor's race. And it turned out they were not right. It was close.
We don't know if they were right because, I mean, there was a spoiler in the mix.
Yes, there was a spoiler. There was a person who got around 40,000 votes, a third candidate who was younger. The 2 main candidates were 57 and 60, so they appeal basically to the same age group.
And the difference between the votes was about 40,000.
40,000, yeah. So with that spoiler in there, that asks the question, were these stolen progressive votes? Because he was also fervently anti-nuclear and just put himself out as the youth candidate. And in those instances, you always look to the side and say, was this guy hired to do this? It was close. Still, I mean, even when you're talking about the 40,000, Niigata is a big population prefecture, and they had pretty good turnout, over 56%.
Right.
And so they had 500,000 votes on one side and 500,000 on another, which is, for a rural prefecture, that's an awesome number to be contesting on both sides. So yeah, you're right. It hasn't definitely been decided in any way. It's not a decisive, smashing victory, but it's a victory nevertheless. And for Abe Shinzo, outside of what happened in Niigata, how that reverberates back to Nagata-cho is Prime Minister Abe is up for re-election as president of the LDP in September. And he has a pretty good following inside the Diet. One could even say almost a fanatical following inside the Diet. But not only Diet members will be voting. There are also the local chapters, and they have a significant number of votes in the first round of the presidential election. And a lot of local LDP officials had been saying, well, with Abe in power, we're never going to win any big local elections. Well, they were proven wrong. Right. And that has just put a lot of gas into his engine for this attempt to go for a third term, and it looks like he's going to just barrel through that without any trouble.
The mirror image of that, though, is what was going on in Niigata during the elections as Abe was fighting against the 2 scandals that were just blossoming during the election campaigning period in Niigata.
Yeah, and that the local elections can frequently be little referenda,
Little bellwether, right?
on what's going on in the center, saying, Mr. Abe has to clean up his act. We can't elect him because there's no direct election of prime ministers. It's elected by the Diet. But we can send a message through his candidate in this election. Well, that message wasn't sent. And in fact, the opposite message was received.
Right. For people that are always watching Tokyo on Fire, they will remember that this election started because the former governor had to resign. He got involved in some...
Well, he got involved in a dating service that was for pay, and then got involved in what was an extortion racket.
Yeah.
And had to start and
well, he resigned as soon as it showed up in the rags. He resigned, but he didn't really do anything illegal. He's 50 years old.
He didn't do
unmarried.
Not really anything. He did nothing illegal.
Yeah.
But it was seen as not okay, especially for a man who was a doctor and a lawyer, elite human being. He shouldn't be. He
was a great governor.
He was doing his job. But
one day,
boom, he's gone.
Things happen quickly here, and that's why we try and follow this stuff. It's never a dull moment.
Yeah, but what it became, however, was a battle for the energy soul, and we saw that immediately. Yoneyama, the victor in this contest, within 48 hours, he's here in Tokyo getting a meeting with the head of METI, the Ministry of Economics, Trade and Industry, which is responsible for the development of nuclear power, meeting with Minister Seiko, and Mr. Seiko beaming there with his little eyes going, yeah, and alongside Yoneyama, the new hero. This was definitely nationalized in a very, very, very quickly from what was a minor sex scandal became a national contest. And that's the way it works sometimes.
Well, we're always trying to make predictions and read the tea leaves, and you really never can tell. We've got the prime minister that's coming up for his third term in September, as you said. Who knows? And you and I hold different views on that. You're more negative about it. I'm more positive about it. But, all of these things culminate to a kind of a crescendo that he's trying to manage.
My view had always been that the locals would turn on him, as they did in 2012. And also how they also knew when they had some kind of pull back in the contest between Hashimoto and Koizumi, they forced the issue to get rid of the old guard. And let's face it, Abe is now old guard. He's been a fixture. He's been there now for 5 years. And, there was some sense that we were exhausted with him. And indeed, a lot of the local LDP officials were arguing that, and that this was going to be the test case. And he passed with flying colors.
Yeah, I don't know if he's kind of old guard, but he's still young, he's still vibrant, and he's still ruling the LDP, pretty soundly. I mean, he has his cadre of people, and his cabinet is looking strong, except for a little bit of the hiccup with the finance minister. That seems to have passed through, right? That came at a kind of critical event during the election campaign in Niigata, but we seem to survive that too.
But the thing is, it's really the locals who needed convincing, and the Niigata election seems to have provided, at least that's the way the Abe team has been saying, look, we can win these things. It seems to have provided the demonstration that he's in the clear.
Right. The Abe administration gets a little bit of a tailwind with a sudden election in Niigata, the home of the largest nuclear facility in the world. Please stay tuned, because this fat lady hasn't sung yet.